Hello, fiendlings. How the hell are ya? Busy week. I finished up recording and mixing the last couple of chapters of The Black Oceania, and now the $5 and $10 patrons have all the chapters for the entire book. I asked for comments, I'm getting them, and will continue mulling over them while I let the book simmer. Why simmer? Because I'm working on The Black Extinction, the final book in the series. I already had several chapters banked for this book, as in written, not edited, and not exactly completely put together, but I'm ignoring them for the moment. In their stead, I've already produced over 12,000 words, and I'm hitting my groove, at least in this section. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this here, but I essentially have 5 or 6 novella-length subplots to mold together into a single book. So instead of interweaving all of that, I'm starting with the first subplot to get it nearly finished, and then I'll start on the next. Once I get a feeling for the timing of everything, I can begin the process of interleaving the chapters. Confused? Good. I don't understand my process either. One day someone will have to explain it to me. Apart from that bit of news, I have more. The Black 2nd Edition audiobook is on pre-order over at Amazon and Audible. The audiobook drops on August 2nd on those platforms. So if you want to hear Joe Hempel narrating my words and bringing the characters to life in a way you've never heard, and you want to support the podcast and the series, spend an Audible credit on it. Refresh yourself with The Black because every quarter you'll be getting another installment with Joe's performance. That said, I still have trade paperback ebook bundles for the Black 2nd Edition up at my store. Visit payhip.com/Paul E. Cooley and take a look at my wares. With that, it's time to let you get back into the story. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 12 of Station 3. Chapter 15. When Zilf made his circuit around the third and final set of supports for the last of the centrifuges, he was on the lookout for more of the goop. He turned his suit lights to full and scanned the shadows. Something twinkled. Eyebrow raised, Zilf walked forward 2 meters beneath the exposed bottom of the centrifuge high above him. Twinkles of glass, or maybe crystal. He squatted down and gently pinched a shard of transparent aluminum from the floor. Shit, he said.
What now?
Yuri was still following the lines. Don't know, Zilf said as he examined the shard. Looks like maybe a piece of faceplate. Yuri froze in mid-step and turned in Zilf's direction, although a good 30 meters separated the pair.
Faceplate? As in someone's helmet face shield broke?
More like shattered, Zilf said. Lots of debris here. Couldn't see it at first because it's so transparent. As he scanned the area again, he saw several more shards twinkle in his lights. Could be more than one faceplate here, Zilf said.
Not good,
Yuri said and returned to the lines. Zilf dropped the shard to the deck and looked up. The bottom of the centrifuge looked discolored. He narrowed his eyes and zoomed in on the cradle holding the massive machine. The copper-colored base had what looked like several goopy handprints on its surface, but the markings were malformed.
What?
Yuri said. He sent Yuri the zoomed-in image.
Just gloves. Probably scrabbling for the control systems up there.
Maybe, Zilf said, but he didn't think Yuri was right. The markings had longer, wider fingers than a normal suit glove. What were they doing?
Who knows? Who cares? I found the fuel lines,
Yuri said. Zilf turned away from the centrifuge and walked to Yuri, who'd moved across the wide bulkhead following a set of pipes, each half a meter in diameter. Red caution coating covered the pipes, and a sign above a large floor panel proclaimed, Fuel Reservoir. Yuri swung his helmet to peer at Zilf.
So what? We go down?
Down, further into the bowels of the refinery? What did 1 and 3 report as their fuel statuses? Yuri shook his head.
Not good. From what I can tell, life support and pressure systems are the only ones online. The rest of the station? Not enough juice.
Right, Zilf said. He'd figured as much. If the computers in the control center had been powered down, the system must have been extremely strained, if not damn near dead. Computers took next to nothing in terms of power. Life support and pressure containment, on the other hand, were no doubt taxing the dying reactors. So we have to get the fuel running again, or we're risking what? Implosion? He shivered at the thought.
Wouldn't go that far, but it's possible.
Zilf heaved a sigh. Down?
Down.
He tapped an armored foot on the panel.
Come on.
Sure, Zilf said with a chuckle. We're keeping Griggs waiting. Yuri snorted.
Who gives a flying fuck about that? He and Harvey can wait, but they're playing poker.
Right, Zilf said, and stepped into the lift leading into the bowels.
Ready?
Yuri said, and tapped the stud on the control dais. The lift jerked before slowly falling through the deck. As with the lift leading from the refinery floor, a transparent aluminum shaft provided a bird's-eye view of the 20-something reservoir tanks. A silent chorus of red and yellow status lights flashed off-tempo and out of sync. However, Zilf heard nothing on his external speakers except the out-of-step hum of sick machinery.
No alarms again,
Yuri said.
Those have their own power backup, so why aren't they sounding? And what's with the lights?
Yuri wasn't talking about the status lights. He was talking about the overheads and the spots that should have been covering the reservoir tanks. Instead of a brightly lit space, as the refinery and the reactor decks had been, this was practically twilight. It reminded Zilf of being several hundred meters below the ocean's surface while his home star's light struggled to illuminate the depths. Zilf panned the lights around and froze. 3 meters. Streaks of the goopy substance, each as wide as a human torso, led from different portions of the module to the reservoir's tanks. Or was it the other way around?
Don't like this,
Yuri said.
No bodies, no one.
And no lights, Zilf reminded him.
More of that crap,
Yuri said as the lift hit the deck. He stared upward and scanned the walls.
Don't see any up there, so whatever makes this shit must have been on the deck. Good to know it can't climb walls.
Zilf stepped off the lift, his plasma torch coming to life, the end glowing that vibrant electric blue. He heard the buzz of Yuri's plasma torch cycling up as well.
I'll check 1 through 10,
Yuri said.
You'll do the others.
Zilf groaned inwardly as he surveyed the open area. The light was bad. There were plenty of places to hide, including the reservoir tanks. Keep my 6. Yuri nodded.
Keep mine.
Always, Zilf said without humor, and walked at a 90-degree angle from the lift into the row of reservoirs. Through his rear cam, he had a decent view of Yuri's area, but if he moved behind the reservoirs, he'd lose track of Yuri altogether. Not a good idea, since there were only 2 of them. One of the rules of an EET team: no one goes off alone. Ever. Of course, that ever depended on the situation. He and Yuri had had to split up more than once to save a structure and prevent meltdowns, but those had been in brightly lit, relatively secure areas. The reservoir module was neither. Zilf followed a swath of the substance to the first reservoir tank, careful not to place his feet in the muck. It was nearly impossible that the crap could affect his suit, but that didn't mean he wanted to track a potentially toxic substance across the station. He was sure Yuri was doing the same. When he reached the reservoir's control panel, he froze, not because of the angry status lights nor the pressure alarms. He froze because the reservoir's lid was made of transparent aluminum, and for the first time, he was looking at Zhao Tu's pure ocean water. His suit lights stabbed through the clear, rust-colored water for the first few meters before turning into gloom and shadow. But there was something in there. Something moving. Yuri?
Ah.
He was bent over Reservoir 1's control panel. I think there's something in this tank.
Yes,
Yuri said.
Fucking strange-looking water, but this one's nearly empty.
Mine's not, Zilf said, and forwarded his feed to Yuri. You see movement? Yuri paused for a moment before saying something greasy in Neo-Russian.
Broken line, maybe?
Even as he was saying the sentence, the words descended into incredulity.
Stupid. Too big for line, but not too big for a big fish.
Zilf shook his head. If a fish is in there, that means there's a break. No way would Shinsho design a reservoir intake to allow foreign materials inside. No fucking way.
Ah, my control panel says tank 1 has negative pressure.
Yuri said.
Yours?
I have pressure, Zilf said, but the intake isn't functioning. The tank's pumps are dead. He brought up the interface and attempted to restart the pumps. No problem with the power generator down here, Zilf said, but the pumps aren't starting.
Broken?
Broken, Zilf said.
Move on to next,
Yuri said.
Or we'll be here for forever.
Or until the station implodes, Zilf said off comms. Whatever was in the tank had disappeared into its depths, and apart from a few bubbles popping at the top of the tank, there was no sign of anything in there. But there was something in there, and he knew it. Still, Yuri was right. They needed to move their asses. Zilph imagined Griggs was still up in the control center with Harvey, trying to reach them on comms and getting nothing while time flowed like a rushing river. They still had a mission, and they were less than halfway to Station 3. The last reservoir took him further from Yuri than Zilph liked. It was irrational, but he couldn't help feeling as though something was watching them. From the ceiling, from the shadows in the corners, from everywhere that wasn't well lit. Fortunately, he didn't find the same trail of slime leading to the last reservoirs. Whatever had left it had stopped at the first tank. Where did it go?
Have some broken pumps over here, too,
Yuri said.
Only 2 of the reservoirs are functional. The rest?
He made a sound between a buzz and a spit.
Kaput, and the intakes are clogged, or maybe damaged.
Clogged intakes, broken pumps, failure in the shielding? Corrosion, maybe? You see an airlock on this level? Zilph asked. Yuri was quiet for a moment.
No, I don't. Why? You looking to take a swim?
Not a bad idea, Zilph said, but I was more wondering how they maintained external equipment.
ROVs and AUVs, maybe?
Yuri said.
I bet EETs are the only ones allowed outside.
Zilph nodded and turned again in a slow circle. You're probably right, but they have to have bays and a way out into the water. He turned in a half circle and let his eyes drink in the scene. Shit, he said and pointed to the far bulkhead. See the red rectangle?
Da,
Yuri said.
Now I do. But that's not large enough to be an airlock. More like an access hatch.
Zilph sighed. Where the fuck are the engineers?
Standing on the deck,
Yuri said dryly.
What are you thinking? Griggs is going to start losing his shit in another 10 minutes.
If we can get to the pumps, we might be able to repair them. Might be as simple as corroded intake valves.
Okay, but where will we get parts?
Zilph tried to keep the frustration out of his voice. If they have a maintenance hatch, they have to have a workshop, too. Yuri cursed in a mixture of English and Russian.
If that's the case,
he said and walked to the hatch,
then maybe we don't even have to go outside.
Zilph followed Yuri but kept his eyes on his cam feeds. Although keeping Griggs and Harvey in the control center had been the right call, he wished they were here now. Would be nice to have someone topside to monitor the control interfaces. When Yuri reached the hatch, he muttered something and tapped a stud nearly the same color as the bulkhead.
And big enough for us,
Yuri said appreciatively.
Shinsho comes through again.
Zilph knew what he meant. Zhao Tu's EET team must have been damned happy most of the hatches had been made for large suits. Egress, ingress, traveling through hazardous environments to perform maintenance, all made more simple by building access points large enough for the engineers to do their jobs. However, that also meant Zhao Tu's stations had been designed with EET suits in mind. That was a bit of a mixed blessing. If Shinsho thought EETs would be a frequent necessity, the facilities must be in the Crimson level of security. Crimson was bad. It was never spoken aloud, but in Zilph's opinion, and more than likely that of all EETs, that Crimson level all but shrieked illegal activities. Things the Board of Trustees or the CEB weren't allowed to know, and didn't want to know because stockholders liked making money. The CEB didn't want to know because if they did, they'd have to find and shutter the largest, wealthiest corporation in the galaxy, which in turn would damage the economy. Don't want to know, Zilph muttered. Sometimes the turtle wants to stay in its shell, his father had said. Sometimes it's easier to hide inside than it is to face the sea. But the turtle can't stay there forever, and the longer it ignores the sea, the more the sea ignores its presence. Another of his father's cryptic analogies, although perfectly apt here. Zhao Tu's very existence seemed to point to a lack of will to investigate, to prosecute, to enforce the law. Zilph wasn't sure Shinsho feared any government agency and wasn't sure they even needed to. But that didn't mean they were willfully careless. From what Zilph had seen, both Stations 1 and 2 had been designed with every level of safety imaginable. Every airlock was disinfected. Every checkpoint required authorization. Every inhabited module had a path to get to the emergency rings, and the rings themselves had been quite sturdy.
It is an airlock,
Yuri said and stepped through the hatch. Eyebrows raised, Zilph walked inside and stood next to Yuri. He instantly understood what the other engineer had meant. It was an airlock, but it was also a lift. Another damned lift. How many levels did Station 2 have? Zilph rolled his eyes. Of course, there was another level, reservoir maintenance. Assuming they printed the station modules bottom up, the refinery's components for pumping would have been the first layer. The lift controls showed access to 2 more levels: coolant maintenance, coolant access.
Access?
Yuri asked.
As in access to the coolant?
Zilf chuckled. Someone's joke. That's probably the level we don't want to have to go to.
Nah,
Yuri said, and touched the stud for maintenance. The hatch closed and the quarantine routine began. Zilf shivered. If they'd put quarantine restrictions here, they either knew something was in the water or feared it was. You're paranoid, he told himself. Standard operating procedure for alien environments. Right. Alien environments Shinsho wasn't supposed to be tampering with without decades of impact studies and permits that were almost never granted.
I have a bad feeling,
Yuri said when the airlock finished its decontamination cycle and the lift began to move.
I like the refinery design well enough, but this is overkill.
Not if there's a reason for it, Zilf said. Yuri made a snorting noise that descended into a plaintive, mocking sob.
And that's why the bad feeling.
Uh-huh, Zilf said. Never said you were stupid.
Never said you weren't ugly.
Uh-huh, Zilf said again, but he was grinning. The lift came to a stop, the lights flashed yellow, and the system requested their access codes. Zilf cracked the security software in seconds, and the lights turned green. The inner hatch opened, and the sounds of dozens of klaxons filled his external mics. Chapter 16. The corridor leading from the hatch and into the module interior flashed with yellows and reds. The overhead lights didn't seem to be functioning, and a sheen of red water covered the deck.
Fuck,
Yuri said, and jogged 3 meters inside, his helmet bobbing side to side as he cleared the area.
Go!
A row of heat sinks, each twice the mass of a consumer hover car, cross-sectioned the module. Unlike the refinery spaces above, the pump level was less than 4 meters in height, relatively cramped, and sans a full HVAC system, Zilf was certain the atmosphere was toxic as hell. He didn't have to worry about the vents on this level. No one came down here unless they were in a suit. Yuri went to the other side of the heat sinks, the 2 men walking slowly forward down the path, their eyes flicking between their collective suit feeds. A puff of steam erupted from the heat sink nearest Zilf, and he spun, his tool hand pointing the deadly plasma torch at the massive block of metal. The lights flashed off its surface, creating a dazzling effect on his visor before the software corrected for it. Heart beating faster than he liked, Zilf turned back to the aisle and continued forward. The nearest access panel, some 3 meters away, flashed with warning lights. A large, damaged, hollow screen pulsed with the words, "Intake error." An indicator flashed on his HUD. His suit's exterior temperature had risen to 80 degrees Celsius. Another belch of steam rose from a heatsink further down the line. If the reactors are offline, what the fuck is causing that heat? Zilf asked.
Don't know,
Yuri said.
I've cleared as much as I care to.
Heard that, Zilf said. Keep
my head on a swivel. Right, babushka.
Zilf took one last look at all 5 areas of concern. Back, front, above, right, left, pausing a beat at each one, looking for movement. This level appeared as vacant and abandoned as the one above. Why wouldn't it be? If it weren't, someone would be down here trying to keep Station 2 from imploding. Shut up, Turtle, he told himself. Shark swims. Cracking into the console's hardware took less than 10 seconds. A console's hollow display, still crackling from power interruptions or maybe from the heat and steam, lit with an emergency repair list. Zilf quickly scanned it, his brain ticking off possibilities as fast as he read them. Yuri, I
found the problem,
Yuri said. Zilf switched to Yuri's helmet cam feed and took a sharp breath. The fail-safe systems, blocks of emergency pumps, power sources, and backups, all designed to prevent meltdowns and implosions, had been smashed. The cabinets had been pried open, their interiors scrambled as though with a combination of a crowbar and flame. The hardened internal components were as dead as the heat sinks, nothing more than mass. Oh shit, Zilf said. He flipped back to the console and hunted through the list again. Fuck me, it's the emergency reactor. Coolant pumps are down.
You're shitting me,
Yuri said.
Some asshole sabotaged not only main reactors, but this one too?
Yeah, Zilf agreed. Unless you desperately wanted an implosion, this is not the way to go.
Water on the deck means we have a leak somewhere in the pumping lines.
Yuri said.
Or something worse. How long do we give before we abandon the station?
Sylph froze when his brain processed what Yuri was asking. You think it's beyond fucked?
Think, Zelf. This room should be ice cold. It's 80 degrees C and rising. We can start roasting meat soon. Emergency systems are fucked. We need to get Griggs and Harvey in GTFO.
GTFO, or Get the Fuck Out, was as common an acronym as any, but when an EET said it, it meant the situation was untenable. A rare admission. More puffs of steam rose from the heat sinks down the line. Even the floor had a haze to it now. Was the water higher, or was that just his imagination? If the pumps had failed and the room reached a high enough temperature, the pressure seals would decay and result in GTFO, Sylph said. He turned from the console and jogged to the lift. Yuri met him there, and the two piled inside. Yuri tapped the stud. Nothing happened.
No, little digital security guard, fuck you.
He paused a beat. The lift's lights flashed yellow, and the hatch closed. Zilf was about to speak, realized his mouth had gone dry, and coughed instead. Yuri turned and stared at him, the visor rising and exposing the large man's flushed cheeks.
You okay?
No, he wanted to say. We have a fucking implosion event imminent, complete with dropping to an alien ocean floor and have no idea if there's even a way back to the surface. Also, he was fairly certain he and Yuri were past Griggs's action deadline. It would take patience to wait for the last judgment. But that's it. We're in a hurry, Sylph said confidently. Yuri paused a beat.
You crack up in there? The fuck was that?
Line from Camus, Sylph said. In other words, we need to GTFO.
Right. The fact I won't have to drag you is enormously helpful.
The lift lurched to a stop. Zilf expected the yellow lights to turn red, but they remained steady. The quarantine procedure hadn't started. He connected to the interface and sent his codes. The system didn't reply. At all. No challenge, no ping back, nothing. Zilf checked the exterior temperature and groaned. Getting hotter. Think they fried the rest of the computers.
Meaning, the lift isn't going to open?
Zilf's tool hand came to life and he made a single, long seam down the center of the decon hatch. The plasma didn't cut all the way through, but he didn't need it to. He took a step back before shooting his foot forward, toe pointed to the ceiling. The metal ripped open and Zilf leaned in, placed his armored hands on either side, and pushed his arms wide. The metal resisted, his suit's servos whining with effort. Finally, the rails holding the hatch in place snapped, and it came apart in two pieces. Instead of asking if Yuri was ready, Zilf immediately ran 4 meters before stopping and waiting for Yuri to catch up. The reservoir room seemed darker than before. He looked up at the ceiling and found he was right. Most of the lamps appeared as though they'd gone out. Yuri moved past him and slowed once he was 5 meters ahead. Zilf took up the slack and ran for the lift. When he was less than 5 meters away from the controls, he slowed and turned to cover Yuri, who was already running toward him. Zilf allowed his eyes to unfocus and scan the area, doing his best to ignore Yuri's rapidly approaching suit and instead worry about what was behind him or flanking him. Movement. Flank. He turned slightly, his tool arm coming up to cover any threats from that direction. The shadows crowded one another, creating overlaps of twilight and complete darkness. Nothing moved there, but Zilf was certain he'd seen something. Yuri reached the lift and stepped onto the platform. He followed Zilf's gaze.
Something?
Something, Zilf agreed, but it's not there now. Yuri activated his suit lights and panned them to focus on the reservoir tanks. The ones that had had the trails of slime were now open, more of the substance congealed on the deck. Something twitched in the shadows before disappearing. By the time Yuri moved his arm to track it, there was nothing to see but more gunk on the deck.
Get us the fuck out of here,
Yuri said quietly, although it sounded as though every word had been said through clenched teeth. Instead of responding, Zilf activated the lift and the two men felt the bump of gears catching and pulling the car upward. As they ascended, Zilf stared at the module's ceiling, his own tool light focused at maximum brightness. The bottoms of the massive centrifuges above came into view. The gunk, whatever it was, slathered the copper-colored metal. Something hid just out of sight, using the centrifuge's circular shape for cover.
You see something?
Yuri asked. He was staring down at the deck.
Because I see several.
Zilf flipped to Yuri's cam feed. Below them, Shapes crawled out of the reservoir tanks. Just as he was about to zoom in, the lift entered the reinforced and opaque sleeve binding the two thick modules.
The fuck was that?
Yuri asked. You tell me, Zilf said. Think they were on the ceiling, too. The Russian shook his head.
No, don't tell me that. I don't want to. Barracks. Station 2 is unstable and an implosion is imminent for the reactor facility.
Griggs's voice crackled in their headsets.
Griggs,
Yuri called out.
You need to head to the barracks immediately.
Griggs said over Yuri's words.
Immediately.
Griggs said again. Automated team message, the suit's onboard AI said. The full message played, although Zilf barely paid attention to it. Griggs and Harvey had vacated the control center. One of them must have managed to bring up the status boards, Zilf thought. Way to go, Griggs. The lift continued upward and Yuri stroked his tool hand.
I'm heating mine up,
he said softly. Zilf didn't want to tell him that he hadn't bothered putting the plasma torch in standby mode. Once he cut through the decontamination hatch, he'd kept it hot and ready.
Did he say barracks?
Yuri was panting. Zilf checked the exterior temperature. The interior of the module had already moved past the 90 degrees Celsius mark. Soon the generators and the emergency reactor would melt, if they hadn't already, and the molten material would burn through the module's bulkheads until they met an alien ocean, and trillions of liters of water would attempt to fill the empty space. The pump level would collapse. Depending on how it imploded, it could start a chain reaction that squeezed the structure like an accordion from the bottom of the station to the very top of the refinery. EET suit or not, he and Yuri would be crushed like an aluminum can pulverized with a sledgehammer. Slowest lift in existence, Zilf said. They'd popped through the sleeve and the refinery chamber came into view, along with every flashing warning light he'd ever dreamed of seeing. The ceiling strobed with them, the bulkheads too, and his comms unit beeped with warning and error messages beamed at him by the remaining emergency systems. A few of the lights stopped flashing and went dead. As the lift brought them flush with the deck, the two men shifted their bodies so they faced opposite directions, their plasma torches glowing with deadly blue teardrops. Zilf stared at the front of the module where the dock resided, while Yuri covered their six. Zilf let his eyes relax for a brief moment, looking for sign of movement, but the flashing and strobing warning lights made the shadows jump and jitter. If there was something moving, he might not even notice it. Yuri's cam feed popped up on his HUD, and Zilf glanced at it. Yuri had raised his head to stare at the platform leading to Station 3. The lights there swirled with angry reds and yellows. Zilf couldn't possibly know what was causing it, but he had a pretty good idea. Pressure loss. The module was getting ready to implode. Move, Zilf said, ran 5 meters forward without waiting for a response, his armored feet smashing into the deck with reckless abandon. No point in being quiet now. No point in walking cautiously and taking your time. This place was about to turn into a solid, flattened piece of metal, and Zilf didn't want to be around when that happened. He paused after his sprint, and Yuri came running by a moment later. 10 meters now. Push. Pull. As they neared the airlock, Zilf took more time to scan the area while waiting for Yuri's advance. He swore he saw something moving behind the nearest centrifuge, but it could have just been the shadows again. He hoped it was. As they neared the lift leading to the control center, Yuri cast his eyes upward to the catwalk. The control center glowed with the light of a single display. How did they manage to get it going again? Zilf wondered. Both the airlock's inner and outer doors were stuck open. Yuri's sensors had finally loosened security to give workers a chance to scramble for the dock. The moment the module started to lose significant pressure, both doors would shut forever. Yuri pushed past him again and entered the airlock. Zilf didn't hesitate to run flat out to join him, Yuri covering his six. The deck rumbled, the vibration traveling through the armor's dampening systems before it struck his spine. Even with the dampeners, it was a hell of a jolt. There were no warning lights left. All of them now flashed a deadly crimson. Zilf reached the dock and slid his eyes to the lift they'd entered the station in. It was gone. Fuck, Zilf said under his breath. Yuri still faced the refinery floor.
Barracks?
Zilf loosed a Farsi phrase that loosely translated as, "Your mother gives goat milk," and made his way to the barracks hatch. Before reaching it, the vertical partition joining the dock to the refinery slammed to the deck. A number of rapid thumps sounded immediately after. Zilf's toes practically jumping as the emergency systems effectively separated the dock module from the refinery module. It wasn't going to be enough. He connected to the barracks hatch, hacked the access codes, and waited impatiently while the massive hatch cycled. Come on, Zilf said, his breathing a little faster than he liked, heart thumping like a pneumatic hammer.
Zilf,
Yuri asked, his voice loaded with stress. Coming, Zilf said. Get over here. We need to get through as quickly as possible. Yuri joined him at the hatch, the pair silent as they waited. Zilf felt the boom rather than heard it. The partition, actually made of two separate slabs of steel, divided the two modules and siphoned out the air between the plates. The result was that sound couldn't get through the hatch, but that didn't keep it from vibrating the module like a tuning fork. Another vibration traveled through Zilf's boots, this one much more powerful than the last. The bastard hatch, Zilf had begun thinking of it as sentient, was in no hurry to open. The red light above the hatch blinked and blinked.
Is it broken?
Yuri asked. Fucking hope not, Zilf said. We cut through here, and we might as well still be in the refinery. When that module goes, I doubt the dock is going to be protected. Yuri nodded.
Then we're...
The flashing red light turned yellow.
Okay?
Yuri finished. The hatch cracked open, and Yuri slid his hand in between the crack and pulled hard. The massive steel door opened wide, and the two men rushed inside, Yuri swinging the hatch closed behind them.